Welcome to the deep dive. You've handed us a really compelling stack of sources today. All of them are focused on this collision that's happening right now. I mean, the collision between this incredibly fast-moving AI and the very slow process of making laws.
It feels like more than a collision, doesn't it? It's like a breaking point. For years, we could sort of treat deepfakes as this abstract thing.
Right, like a niche internet problem.
Exactly. Or, maybe something for conspiracy theorists to worry about. But the analysis we're looking at, it confirms we've passed a really critical threshold.
Okay, let's unpack that shift, because the premise here is pretty stark. The idea is that deepfakes in 2026 are just fundamentally different. We've moved past novelty and straight into weaponization, causing harm that's psychological, financial, and in some cases, physically dangerous.
And that's the core realization. The scale and the speed have changed everything. Because the harm is no longer theoretical, you see governments just abandoning those abstract AI ethics talks.
And moving towards what?
Straight into concrete legislative action. So our mission today is to really understand this process. The sources call it legal hardening. We need to figure out why specific criminal offenses and tougher penalties are being rolled out so fast, treating this as a public safety issue.
Not just a policy concern anymore.
Not at all.
That is the mission. And I guess to understand the hardening, we have to go back. We have to look at that foundational tension that got us here in the first place.
The problem isn't really the complexity of it all, it's the velocity. It's the speed. Laws, they operate on a timeline of years. It takes forever for a bill to become law, for courts to set precedent.
Well, technology operates in months.
Exactly. For years, policymakers would give these broad statements about misinformation or content moderation. But while they were talking about principles, the tools themselves were getting into everyone's hands.
And that's the point where the technology just accelerated away from the regulators. I mean, you used to take a skilled creator, someone who really understood graphics or coding, to make a believable deepfake.
Right, and now?
Now, like the sources point out, anyone can do it. Simple apps, prompts, APIs. The barrier to entry for creating this kind of misuse, it's just gone.
That democratization of misuse, you could call it, plus the sheer speed of development, has put immense pressure on legal systems. And it's happening through two specific mechanisms. The first one is credibility.
Credibility as in they're just good enough to fool us now.
They're good enough to fool almost anyone. They're photorealistic, the voices are perfect, they're incredibly convincing. But it's more than just looking real. It means they pass that standard human scrutiny test.
The gut check.
The gut check. If you see a video of a CEO saying something, your first instinct used to be, well, it looks real, so it probably is. Now, you might be suspicious, but the deepfake is so good that that suspicion just gives way to belief. You need, like, a forensic analysis to disprove it.
Which takes time. And that brings us to the second accelerant you mentioned, distribution. The digital world doesn't really wait around for forensic analysis.
Not for a second. Synthetic content travels at the speed of social media, right? It often gets amplified by algorithms that are just designed to prioritize engagement, not truth. The real problem is platform inconsistency. If creation is instant and the spread is instant, then the old legal frameworks, they're obsolete. The harm is done before the legal system even wakes up.
So the law is constantly playing catch-up, and the cost of losing that race is getting massive. And this widens that gap, doesn't it, between what the tech allows and what society can safely handle.
And just look at where the most sensitive harms are popping up. It's in all the areas where the law is traditionally the most cautious. Sexual exploitation, child safety, manipulating elections, sophisticated financial fraud. When you see harm in these high-stakes categories become common, the demand for immediate legal action, it just becomes a public necessity. That's the trigger. That's the unavoidable trigger for this legal hardening.
Okay, so to really grasp this legal response, we need to dig into the four specific drivers that the sources are citing. These are the core mechanisms that show why the law has to respond now, not 3 years from now. Let's start with the one that probably affects the most people, collapsing the cost of abuse.
Historically, if you wanted to launch, say, a harassment campaign or impersonate someone in a believable way, it took a lot of resources.
Time, skill,
maybe even other people helping you. It was expensive in terms of effort and risk.
But now that cost is basically zero.
It is. Impersonation is cheap, it's fast, anonymous, and you can do it over and over again. And think about what that shift means. It enables huge automated harassment campaigns. You don't just target one person anymore. You can target dozens of employees in a company for sabotage or a whole community for extortion, all with personalized, convincing synthetic stuff.
And the consequence isn't just that the victims suffer, but that the system itself just gets overwhelmed. Law enforcement, HR departments, they can't possibly investigate fast enough when they're hit with 1,000 fake incidents made by one person in a weekend.
Exactly. The low cost just changes the economics of malice. And the legal system has no choice but to start treating these high-volume attacks as really serious crimes.
Moving on to the second driver, which is, frankly, the most disturbing one, the non-consensual intimate imagery, the so-called nudification.
This specific application has been a huge catalyst for new laws everywhere. It targets ordinary people, a lot of times teenagers, and it's just a brutal tool for bullying, for coercion, for revenge. What makes it so awful to combat is that the moment those images are out there, the harm, the emotional and social harm, is instantaneous. And you can't really ever reverse it completely.
And the analysis here is so important because it gets into the legal classification of it. The law is being forced to treat this as a serious crime, a violation of someone's dignity and safety, and move past just calling it online drama.
Yes. The emphasis is on the severity of the psychological impact. The consequences are real and they are lasting. We're talking about ostracization, severe mental health crises, long-term damage to your reputation. The speed of the tech means the law has to step in proactively to stop this stuff from even being made and shared. It's being recognized as equivalent to traditional image-based sexual abuse.
So if impersonation is cheap and weaponized for psychological damage, what happens when you combine it with, well, the oldest crime in the book, fraud? That takes us to driver number 3, which is less about visuals and more about synthetic voice.
Voice is such a powerful tool for social engineering. It exploits one of our deepest human tendencies. We trust familiar sounds. A convincing synthetic voice message from someone we think we know, a CEO asking for a wire transfer, a bank representative.
Or even a panicked family member needing money.
Right, and it can just override your critical thinking in an instant.
It weaponizes that element of surprise and familiarity. If my CFO gets a call that sounds exactly like me, asking them to break protocol for a payment, their first trained reaction is probably compliance, because they trust the source, not suspicion.
And that's the genius of the attack. It bypasses all your technical firewalls by going straight for the human one. It's an efficiency gain for criminals. They don't have to spend weeks hacking your network. They spend minutes cloning a voice and making a high-pressure call that triggers a huge, costly action. We're seeing this hit corporations and vulnerable people like grandparents really hard.
Which leads us straight into the fourth driver, and this one might be the most insidious of all. Trust decay. This is the damage that happens just because the technology exists, even when it's not being used for something evil in that moment.
It's the erosion of our confidence in reality itself. The sources highlight that the sheer availability of this tech creates an epidemic of what they call plausible deniability. If a real piece of video evidence, say footage of a contract being signed, looks bad for someone, they can just claim
It's a deep fake.
it's a deepfake. And without huge, expensive, time-consuming forensic resources, it's really hard to immediately prove them wrong.
And the reverse is true too, right? Someone can create something manipulated and then insist that it's authentic.
Correct. And this just corrodes accountability everywhere, in politics, in business, even in personal disputes.
So if we take a step back and look at the big picture here, why does this legal hardening matter beyond just punishing people?
Because our legal system, and really society itself, it runs on a shared consensus of fact. If we lose the basic ability to agree on what is real enough to act on, if we can't trust a recorded contract or a sworn video deposition or even authenticated security footage, the whole infrastructure of accountability, law, and justice just breaks down. The law is responding not just to protect individual victims, but to preserve its own ability to function.
That's a critical insight, that this is an act of institutional self-preservation. So let's transition now to the so what. If this is our reality, what are the actionable implications? Who needs to change what they're doing tomorrow?
The implications are huge, starting with the policymakers who have to write these new laws. Their challenge is immense. They have to legislate with surgical precision.
It's a real tightrope walk they're on, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the laws are too broad, they risk what the sources call chilling legitimate satire, artistic expression, and journalism.
But if they're too narrow, they completely fail to protect the victims they were meant to help.
So what's the approach?
The recommended path is to focus on specific harms and the criminal intent, not the technology itself. So, for example, don't outlaw creating a synthetic voice. Outlaw using a synthetic voice to impersonate someone for the purpose of fraud or harassment or creating non-consensual images. It shifts the focus from the tool to the malice behind it.
And the platforms, the social media companies, the hosting services, they're facing incredible pressure now. The era of just putting out a vague policy statement is definitely over.
Absolutely. The expectation is shifted to measurable, auditable commitments. That means stronger, unified detection tools across all platforms, clear, unambiguous labeling of any synthetic content, and this is crucial, dramatically faster takedown times. Cooperation with law enforcement, especially around child safety, is no longer optional. The public wants to see the numbers on how quickly harmful content is getting removed.
And for organizations, for businesses, this means deepfakes are no longer some abstract IT problem. They are a core, immediate security risk.
It requires a total shift.
Yeah.
From a reactive security posture to a proactive procedural one. Digital verification protocols have to be implemented where they never were before. Think about it. If an executive sends an email asking for a wire transfer, the procedure can't just be a confirmation email anymore. It has to involve a mandatory, pre-agreed upon secondary human verification step.
Specific examples are key here, I think. We're talking about things like callbacks for payment requests or requiring multi-step approval for any sensitive action.
Precisely. Your physical, human-verified procedures are now your last line of defense against these attacks. And training has to go beyond just spotting phishing emails. Staff need to be trained to recognize the tactics of synthetic voice and video manipulation. The weak link is often the human, and criminals are now targeting that link with AI.
Finally, a huge burden falls on parents and educators. Media literacy isn't just a nice-to-have school subject anymore, it's a mandatory safety skill.
It has to become a practical life skill. We need to teach kids not just that things can be fake, but how to verify, how to recognize the social pressure that comes with deepfake abuse, and how to report it immediately.
And for adults who are dealing with victims, understanding the psychology of it is so important.
Yes, abusers who use this technology, they rely on the victim's shame and fear to keep the abuse quiet. Educators, parents, we all have to create an environment where a kid feels safe reporting it instantly, knowing that the shame belongs 100% to the abuser, not them.
We've taken a deep dive into this rapid, pretty dangerous shift from deepfake novelty to outright weaponization. We've looked at the forward drivers and the legal hardening that's happening across society. The central thesis is clear. We've hit a threshold where synthetic media demands a focused, precise response that is centered on safety and human dignity.
And I think the final takeaway from our sources puts it perfectly. Trust is an infrastructure, and deepfakes attack that infrastructure directly. The path forward isn't panic. It requires clarity, clear laws, real platform accountability, and a complete overhaul of our everyday verification habits.
Which leaves us all with a final thought to mull over. If seeing and hearing is no longer a reliable standard for truth, how fundamentally must your standard verification procedures change tomorrow? How do you protect yourself and your organization? It's time to start thinking about those new, mandatory, everyday verification habits right now.